Okay, thank you, Linda. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar for June the 12th. And I guess we'll be going through a few things today. There's been some stuff going out in the field that has created a few questions from producers. So we'll be going over as many of those as we can. And so for today, basically what we're going to be doing is crop update as to what's been happening over the past week. So with that, start off with a little bit of weather. I think that was probably one of the issues this past week that created some concern with producers. We did have some severe weather events that came through that dropped some major rainfall in some places. And as you can see by the picture, there was some funnel clouds, and this picture was taken in the Salt Coast Church Bridge area. So basically not far from Yorkton and almost right in line with the Russell area. So that area, also the Russell-Angusville area experienced some hail this past week, and this picture was sent from Sharps at Angusville. And so they definitely had some hail there, and probably anywhere from 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch and in a short period of time of rain as well, and that was all through that same system where those funnel clouds were seen this past week. So a little bit of an update on as to what we've been experiencing for weather over the past week. We look in the southwest, we're still a little bit behind with our growing degree days, and we can see that with the crop progression. A lot of the soybeans, canola are growing fairly slow. We definitely aren't seeing the vigorous or the quick growth. Maybe we'll be seeing that this week. We're starting to get some heat this week, but you can see that our growing degree days are still below the average, and pretty much throughout the whole area. Rainfall amounts. Some guys have crept up a little bit. There's some of the areas that weren't getting much rainfall. That Russell area, the Bertle area, the Angusville area, those areas received some rainfall this past while here, so their percentages has come up, which is good because a lot of those areas were needing rainfall. But you can see the majority of the area has received some rainfall in some amounts anyways. Crops are emerging fairly well. The rainfalls that has been coming has been fairly timely, and there's still, I guess, some crop that is being planted. This is a picture of the winter wheat field, the field that Elmer's been tracking in the Shoal Lake area. This was a picture from last week's webinar, so as you could see, the winter wheat was coming on and was looking like it needed to be sprayed or just been sprayed. And this is what it looks like this week, and you can definitely tell they got a little bit of rainfall, and the crop definitely sprucing up quite a bit. But I guess one of the things you can see is that this winter wheat field is definitely going to make it, and it's coming on fairly good right now. One of the things I've noticed over the last couple of days is the early seeded spring wheat crops are catching the winter wheat crops that were left in the area, so we're not going to see a big, I guess, they're looking the same in height-wise. The winter wheat crops are still ahead in leaf staging, but right now we're going to see probably a fairly short winter wheat crop, and timing-wise it's not going to be that far ahead of our early seeded spring cereals. There's, again, the same picture, or a picture of winter wheat up in the Shoal Lake area as well. You can definitely see the rows are starting to fill in now, and just a crop that is taking off. And this one was taken yesterday in the St. Clair area. A little bit deceiving by this picture. This is the good spot of the field. It was one of those fields that you weren't sure if should be left or not. The producer decided to leave it because he had to do some reseeding of some other crops, so he left the winter wheat. And it's come on pretty good, but there's still definitely areas in the field that are going to be bare and not produce a lot. But you can see that this crop is definitely advancing fairly well. One of the questions we had early on this spring was whether or not winter wheat that's going to germinate this spring, would it produce seed? And a lot of producers were concerned if it needed to grow last fall and break through the soil surface and get established so it would produce seed this spring. Elmer sent me this picture yesterday, and this is wheat that germinated this spring, and you can see opened up the sheath, and you can see the head forming. So it's definitely going to produce a head. So that helps us answer that question. That you know, those as long as it goes through that cold spell in the ground to break its dormancy, it does produce seed the following year. So that's good news for producers that left the winter wheat, and it was what we expected it was going to happen anyways. So a little bit about the crops update and as to where we're sitting. Right now, about 90% of the crop is in the ground. There are some areas to the south here that have been experiencing some pretty heavy rains over the past 2 to 3 weeks that are still going, and that's kind of that Wascata, Deloraine through to Boissevain area where there's still some producers that are putting crop in. Those areas are probably in that 60% range, but the majority of the rest of the crop in the southwest is in the ground, and producers have been spraying this past week, trying to get ahead of the weeds. The weeds have definitely started coming, and most producers are starting with the cereals. Some of the guys that got going a little bit earlier putting crop in. Some of the canola is being sprayed right now as well. We have some insect issues that we're going to be dealing with, and we're going to be talking about a little bit later in today's webinar. And one of the other things is starting to get calls. Most germination was really good, and it hadn't seen too many problems. But after these last few heavy rainfall events, some of the stuff that got sown just before, we're starting to see some crusting. So starting to get some calls regarding the germination, or whether or not some of those we're going to get enough plants come through the ground. Some of the soil's gotten pretty rough and pretty hard over the last couple of days here. So be doing some checking for the rest of this week on some of those fields and seeing if there's going to be I guess a high enough plant count. So that's something that we'll probably have more of an update for next week. Last week we talked about canola and the frost situation, and we were talking about, we were just going to need to make sure to give the canola some time. A lot of the canola is going to grow through it. We did have some areas in the southwest that experienced some pretty heavy frost, and we were always mentioning to watch the growing point, and you can see by this picture here, the canola has definitely started to regrow and is going to make it through the frost situation. So that's good. I haven't been in too many fields where something different is showing. It's basically we're seeing all the canola starting to regrow from those growing points and producing new leaves. So that's a good sign for canola. I guess one of the biggest things with the canola is the flea beetles. It's a little harder to see on this one, but you can see flea beetles are still creating a lot of issues in the canola fields. We've had good germination. The canola has come up. We've had one of the things is some of the canola has been in the ground for a long period of time, and now that it's coming through, it's almost in perfect timing for when we're getting our higher numbers of flea beetles right now. And we're having some producers in a situation where the insecticide that was on the seed is wearing out, and maybe they might have to go in and do some spraying for flea beetles because some of the damage is becoming quite extensive in some areas. And I guess just a heads up to the producers is the flea beetles do have to feed on the plant to pick up the insecticide. So you're going to see some damage to the plants. I guess the biggest thing is you need to be monitoring those fields and trying to I guess try to limit the damage they're going to do. And I think a rough number to keep in mind is 25% defoliation across the field is a pretty good starting point to be looking at having to spray. And the biggest question I'm getting right now is, can I wait because there's not enough weeds out there right now, and I would sure like to go across and spray and one application, especially on the glyphosate tolerant varieties. They're wanting to go out and do one app across already and get some weeds that are there. And I guess one of the issues is there isn't a lot of weeds in some of these fields yet. So, but some of the damage in some of the places is getting severe enough. One of the things to watch for too is where the feeding is occurring. If the feeding is occurring on the new part or the new leaf, that's something to watch for. You could see the damage on the cotyledons here, and you would say that it's quite severe, but that's not too bad yet. It would be if you had that same kind of damage on this smaller leaf that's just starting to come out. That's where I would start getting concerned, because there's not as much area, it can't handle as much feeding as these other leaves can. The other thing to watch for is when we've had some of those cooler days and some of those windier days, flea beetles tend to stay lower down, and we're getting some feeding on the stems as well. So just to keep an eye on there when you're going out in the field, just not to look at the leaves, but also look at stems as well. And yeah, so regarding flea beetles, right now a lot of the early sowing canola crops are starting to get that 2 and 3 leaf stage already, and a lot of those fields are past the point where the flea beetles are going to be able to do any damage. So it's probably just the fields that are of great concern are the ones that were probably emerging over this past week here, week to 10 days. Those are the ones where I would say you need to keep an eye on, because we've got the heavy population of flea beetles and you got smaller plants. So there's something to be watching for as you're out there just scouting your fields. This week, while we're talking about canola, I'm going to talk a little bit about blackleg and canola. This week in Portage, the Canola Council had a really good field day where they were talking about blackleg and canola and just different things to be looking for when you're out scouting. And when we were out in the field, it was very difficult or virtually impossible to find any blackleg in seedling canola out in the fields. This picture was taken from stuff that was actually grown in a greenhouse. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show this picture just so you would have an understanding as to what to look for when you're going out in the field to see blackleg on the seedling canola. So it definitely is something where it's pretty noticeable, definitely something you can pick out. It's the brownish type lesion, and if it's progressed far enough, there'll be black dots or pycnidia in the middle of the gray area throughout this area here. And like I mentioned earlier on, we're not seeing a whole lot of it right now. There's a lot of I guess between the advertising and the talk, a lot of producers, a lot of people are talking about a blackleg and the issue that blackleg has been, and it definitely has been an issue over the past few years in canola and gaining or growing actually. So is it wise to be out there spraying when you're going to spray your weeds to be spraying for blackleg? I guess it goes back to a little bit of what Holly talked about last week when we talked a bit about blackleg and canola, and what she mentioned was your history of blackleg on the farm, your your crop rotation, the varieties you're growing. Most of the varieties out there right now have an R rating for blackleg, but that's really not a true R rating, because virtually we are finding blackleg in every field. So I guess the decision comes down to whether you think you're at a risk. The fungicides that you'll be applying now will probably last for 12 to 14 days, so you get 2 weeks of control, and that'll be enough to get that plant into that cabbage stage. So I guess you need to determine if I guess that's going to be money well spent, or is it money better spent spraying later on for sclerotinia if your rotation is tight. So I guess that's something you need to consider when you're going to be going out and spraying your canola. One of the crops that's fairly new in the Southwest here this year is soybeans, and there's more and more producers that are growing it. I shouldn't say it's fairly new. There's been producers growing them for quite a few years, but it's I guess the new part about it is we have a lot more new producers this year, and with that we're starting to see some issues as well as questions regarding spraying time, when to be spraying, what we should be looking for, and most of the recommendations are for you to see the first trifoliate before you go out there and spray. And when you look at this picture here, there's your two cotyledons that would have pushed through the ground, and this would be your first trifoliate. So this would be kind of the stage that they're looking at spraying with glyphosate. As most of the varieties are Roundup tolerant varieties. So the question we're getting is, well, before I go into that, this is last week we were talking about, it was definitely getting late for planting soybeans, and we should be, getting, starting to think about what, if we should start changing our seeding plans. And this was sown last Friday, and as of Monday here, we already had the sprout on it, and it's going to be coming through the ground. So soil temperature, we discussed a bit last week as well, that it was still in that, below 10 degrees Celsius. It definitely has warmed up a fair bit over the last while here, and things are germinating, growing fast. And we can see that with the weeds that are growing out there right now. There's definitely a lot of weeds that are growing, and so that's why the soybeans that were planted are going to be up fast, and hopefully they'll be able to catch up. Going back to what I was talking about when we were talking about the spraying of the soybeans, one of the issues that we're seeing because of the cool conditions and because the soybeans were planted in cool soil, they were sitting for a while. What we're seeing out in the field is we're seeing plants like this one on the top here that's probably in the first trifoliate stage, but meanwhile we've got plants that are just breaking through the ground. And so the question is, well, what time or when can I get out there and spray? Because weeds are starting to come as well now. And I guess there's a couple things that two or three things I guess you need to be concerned about. First of all, if you go out at this stage and spray, mechanical damage, as this plant is coming through the ground, it's got a hook on the plant as it's pushing its way through the soil, and if you're to drive over that, you'll physically damage the stem, and it won't come back. So basically, any plants that you'll be driving over that are in this stage here, they will not make it. So that's one thing to consider. I guess the other thing to consider is, until they get right opened, you definitely would, be wanting to hold off the spraying because, again, there'll be a potential for damage. The other thing that I guess you need to be watching for is that the weeds don't get out of control for you as well. And I guess that's one of the things that we're seeing in some of these fields that producers maybe didn't get a burn off on. And we're starting to see buckwheat in the 3 to 4 leaf stage already. We're starting to see hemp nettle in the 3 to 4 leaf stage. We're seeing some of this volunteer cereal crops going into the 4 leaf stage. And volunteer cereals maybe not as big a concern, but when you're going to be trying to control buckwheat with glyphosate and you're going to get it up in that 4 leaf stage before you're out hitting it, you're definitely going to be in a situation where it's not going to be controlling as well as it as you could get. So I think right now you need to make the decision kind of like you would with canola. You need to, if the weeds are there and they're starting to become an issue, you need to go and spray, because if you look at these plants here and you're full of weeds in these plants, you might have potential to be losing these ones as compared to losing the few that still haven't come through the ground. So again, I think it's going to be a field-by-field case here, where you're going to have to make the judgment call whether you can get out and spray a little bit earlier. One of the things I noticed yesterday when I was out in this field of soybeans, we were noticing that we were getting some yellowing of some of the plants, and from everything I've been able to figure out so far, and with sending some of these pictures around to some of the soybean guys, they've been telling me that it looks more of a moisture stress, and this area has experienced a fair bit of rainfall. They were wet when they went into seeding, and they've been getting most of the rains that have been going through. So that kind of makes sense that it's it's just had wet feet for a long enough period of time. So that's why we're seeing some of the yellowing. So you may be seeing that in some of the fields that that you're looking at, or that you're growing. So that's just one thing to I guess keep an eye out for. Okay, I've been getting some calls regarding tan spot and septoria in our spring wheat, especially on wheat rotations, and we talked a bit about this last week as well with Holly, but calls started coming in this week with producers out there spraying, and the question of course comes up, should I be throwing some tilt in with my or some fungicide in with my herbicide to control some of the disease. Again, it's a judgment call. From what I've been able to find out cost-wise, it's not very expensive. I think you're looking at $2 to $3 an acre. So really, it's not a major cost if you're going across the field already. I guess the big thing I always say is that if you don't need to apply it, then why be spending the money? And if you're in a situation like this picture was, and I got this picture yesterday out in the western part of the area here, that's fairly well-established disease on those plants already, and probably wouldn't be a bad idea to add some fungicide just to slow it down and to give the plant the ability to grow and develop and not have to be fighting off disease. You don't know what's going to be coming ahead of us, whether it be weather events or whether it be hot and dry or cool and damp. So by applying a fungicide to this, you would probably help your plant by giving it more of a fighting chance against what it's going to be facing over the next while here. On the other hand, if you are out there in the field and you don't see any disease or any of these kind of symptoms showing up on your plants, then with the weather we've been getting and with the warm conditions now, we're seeing every second or third day you're going to see a new leaf, and the new leaves that come out aren't going to be protected by the fungicide you apply when you spray your herbicide. So are you getting 7 days of control? Yeah, you're getting it on the older leaves, but on the new leaves that are coming out, they're not going to have it. And really, because they're growing, the plants are going to be growing so fast, or at least we hope they'll be growing fast from now on, they're probably going to outgrow a lot of the issues that'll take you right through to fall. So I guess look at your rotation. If you're in a situation like this slide where there looks like there's lots of disease, probably not a bad idea to throw in the fungicide. If you've got a half decent rotation and you're not seeing any disease on your leaves, then it might be better off saving your money and maybe going at flag leaf stage and at heading stage for fusarium and putting that money into that investment, and instead of spending it now. So again, it's kind of like the blackleg and canola. I think it's a judgment call, or even the flea beetle situation. You need to be out there scouting your field and seeing if it's worth the extra dollars to go and put it on. We've been a while back. I started a weed of the week kind of thing, and we've had a few issues this last couple webinars where we really didn't talk too much about the Ava weed of the week, because we had some really good presentations that took a little bit longer periods of time. So this week we're back to the weed of the week, and wanted to talk about hemp nettle. I'm definitely seeing in some areas a lot of hemp nettle showing up. So I wanted to, I guess, talk a little bit about it and give a kind of a brief description of hemp nettle. So hemp nettle is an annual reproducing by seeds. It's got square stems that are covered with bristly hairs. It can grow up to anywhere from a foot to 2 feet tall. Its leaves are fairly long. They are opposite each other, so basically when they come out in pairs basically. The leaves are jagged edged, they're toothed and hairy. The flowers are mainly at the top of the plant on the upper leaves, and they're in the axils of the leaves. Usually it's a white flower. Sometimes it can be a pinkish to purple color, and the seeds can remain dormant for long periods of time in the soil. So really, if you have them, you're probably going to be dealing with them for a few years. There's a seedling hemp nettle, and you can see the round type cotyledons, and you can see the first 2 leaves coming out already. And as you go to a little bit bigger one, you can see the leaves, what they mean by opposite, and then what they also mean by the coarse toothed kind of leaves, and they do have hairs on them. Don't be mistaken with cleavers. It's got hairs on it as well, but cleavers will be a sticky plant. The hemp nettle really isn't overly sticky, and it isn't going to bind to clothing or hair. Picture as it gets a little bit older and flowers, and you can see where the flowers are towards the upper part of the plant and right at the center where the leaves would come out, and you can definitely see the whitish type flowers. Control. There's several products that are available for control. Best thing to do there would be to check your weed control guide, and depending on the crop you're growing, there's going to be several methods. I think one of the keys that I always say with this weed here is to try to control it early before it gets too big. One of the problems with hemp nettle, if it gets a little bit on the larger side, it's a little harder to control, and the products you're going to have to use are going to be a little bit more costly. So I guess that's the big one with it, is to try to control it early. And I guess that kind of goes to basically the same as a lot of the other weeds that are out there. It seems like controlling all weeds early seems to be the best, just like seeding early seems to be the best. So with that, Linda, is there any questions?
Yes, Lionel. Actually, I have a question. It's regarding insecticide. Would you suggest any particular insecticide over another for flea beetle control, i.e. 7XLR or Desis or Matador?
Really, they all work. They're all pretty good products, so I'm not really going to pick one over the other. One of the things you need to do is talk to the place where you bought your seed, because some of the companies that sell seed are also in marketing herbicides and insecticides, and some of the companies I've been hearing that if you bought their seed, you could actually get free insecticide if you're having a flea beetle issue. So I think what you need to do is check with your seed dealer and find out if there is any programs, because getting it for nothing would definitely be the worthwhile way of going. But most of the products work very good on flea beetles. Flea beetles aren't that hard to kill. Key to killing flea beetles is you need to be spraying during the heat of the day when they're most active, and so if you're going to be spraying at later in the evenings or very early in the morning, which if it's windy, which happens a lot of times, your control isn't going to be as good as it would be if you would be spraying during the mid-afternoon when you have most of the flea beetles being active and feeding.
Thanks, Lionel. That's the only question that I have right now. So.
Okay. Well, that's actually the my last slide for today too. So I guess with that, I didn't have a guest presenter today, so I just was going to go through kind of a crops update as to what's been going on over the past week. And so if there's no more questions, I guess we'll end the webinar for today.